Here's a quick little tutorial on importing an AutoCAD drawing into Vectorworks via a Shuttle file. A Shuttle file is essentially a Vectorworks document that already has the AutoCAD file imported into it directly, and then you reference the Shuttle file into your master Vectorworks drawing. The reason why this is something that is advantageous to do is oftentimes you'll receive an AutoCAD file that's huge for AutoCAD standards and has a bunch of line work, geometry, materials, what have you. And every time you open up a Vectorworks drawing that has all that stuff imported into it, it wants to take a bunch of time to read it, render it, so on and so forth. The Shuttle file kind of skips past all of that and allows you to move around the document a little easier. So let's get started. My first step is always create kind of a folder hierarchy of the project that I'm working on. So we'll open that guy up. You'll see that I have my master drawing already set up here. And I've taken the drawing that I received from the vendor, or from the venue in this case, and saved it in its own folder, and then created a folder for the Shuttle file just to keep everything organized. I'm a little OCD when it comes to that, so we can discard all that. So in Vectorworks, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create a new drawing, and it's important that it's a create blank document. You're trying to make this file as lean as possible, so you don't want to bring over any of your classing, any of that stuff, because it'll kind of just get confused up. So let's bare bones blank document. Hit OK. So here we are in our new drawing. So most people know this step, but I'll walk through it. File, import DWG, and we will navigate to our source drawing right there, venue risers. So all of this stuff will pretty much auto-populate based on your user settings. So if you're set up for metric, you should kind of see metric or inches or whatnot. I never really mess with any of that stuff. The only thing that I do confirm is the prefix that I have everything assigned, which is really handy. So if you click on Advanced, Classes and Layers, add prefix to imported DXF DWG layers. Make sure that's clicked, or that it's checked, and you have a prefix in there. What this does is it essentially adds a prefix onto whatever other prefixes the AutoCAD layers will import as classes, what they already have. This is just a way of organizing it to better fit your standards and to maneuver around. If you have hundreds of classes you're trying to dig through, you don't want to skip past a bunch of random AutoCAD ones. I prefer ZDWG because that sets all of those classes down at the bottom of my class window, and I don't have to see it. I can create filters that have all of that turned off, so I can just see my drawings classes. So once that's set up to your liking, hit OK, then you'll hit OK again to end that, and we'll see that this drawing has imported correctly. I have some quick 3D geometry in there, nothing too special, but that's it for creating the Shuttle file. So what you want to do is save it as, navigate back to this folder, throw it into your Shuttle file, and you'll say, in this case, venue riser Shuttle file with the date. Save it. There you go. You can close that file, hopefully never come back to it again. So now we're going to open your master file, which right here we have it. I have some basic stuff going on here, nothing too special. So the next step to get your Shuttle file into your master file is not going to be, you're not importing it, you're simply referencing it. And the best way to go about that is to open up your organization window, click on the References tab, click on New, and you'll navigate to that file And you're going to click on Shuttle files and make sure that it's the Shuttle file that you're importing, not the AutoCAD. Click on Open. You want to make sure it is an absolute path. If you have it set up to where it can be relative, sometimes that works. I found just make it an absolute path, no questions about it. Hit OK. So you're not quite done just yet. You want to make sure it's highlighted again. Hit Settings. And there's two things that you could do here. I'm going to walk you through the layer import because there's some things that you're going to want to do that are more advantageous to layer import as opposed to a design layer viewport, which for those of you who are questioning what a design layer viewport is, it's essentially a window into this reference drawing. So you can say, hey, I'm going to draw a viewport on my design layer that says, in this reference drawing, I want to see these layers, these classes, and so on. So you treat it just like you would a viewport. Brings over 3D geometry, but it's not actually within the drawing. I prefer the layer import because it does actually bring that geometry into the drawing, but it's all locked and you can easily discard it and it's not going to cause any issues. So we'll say layer import, click on OK. So now the next step is to highlight it again. I don't know why Vectorworks does this. It's a little frustrating. Highlight it again, click on Edit. And this is where you're going to say which layers from that reference drawing you want to bring in. By default, it always says Design Layer 1 because that's the design layer that's default for any new drawing. There's always a Design Layer 1. That's not the one that we're going to import. We want to reference the one that is the file that we're going after. Go ahead and check that. Everything else, you can leave it just fine. Hit OK. So the next thing you'll want to check for is scaling. You can see that all my other layers in this drawing are 1/4 inch scale. And sometimes it'll bring in a random scale, sometimes it'll match up. You just need to check it if it matters. For me, this does matter because it's something that's in context to everything else within my show drawing that I need to make sure is correct. So we'll change that to 1/4 inch. And there you go. That should all be correct. So once you hit OK, you'll see that now you have a new layer down here. And it is in italics. And that's letting you know that it's a reference drawing. So you can see that I now have geometry in there that I never had, and that is that guy right there. Quick and easy. So once we decide that we've drawn everything that we want, I have my geometry that I've traced over, that I've redrawn, or let's say, I don't want to redraw this one. I want to actually bring this guy in. So if you make that your active layer, you can then select that geometry, that object. And you're going to notice that you can't just move it. It's because it's locked, because it's kind of it's a reference. It's not really meant to be there, but you can still interact with it as you need to in a 3-dimensional space. But what you can do is you can select it. You'll see that it's selected in the OIP. If you go to Modify, Unlock, it is now open. You can modify, you can move it over here, and I'm going to take it off of that layer and throw it on my venue layer. So now if I go back to the venue layer, it's there. And if I turn off the reference drawing, it's still there. So I've done a couple things. I've redrawn a couple 2D profiles, and I've stolen some of the geometry from the reference drawing. I no longer need that reference drawing anymore because it's also causing classes here. If my resource manager, you'll see a bunch of symbols, hypothetically. I don't want any of that stuff that's just creating bloat It's unneeded. Let's get rid of that reference drawing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to the organization palette, click on references, make sure that that reference is selected, hit delete, and it's going to ask you, what do you want to do with all of the stuff that came with it? Do you want to keep it? Do you want to delete it? You want to simply just break the link and you don't have to update it every so often? This is your chance to do all that. I prefer just delete it. I don't want it in the drawing at all. Reference layers, delete that layer. So that means any geometry that's on that layer, it's gone. Any resources that it brings over, symbols, line types, materials, anything that comes over not within the drawing space but in your resource manager that comes from your reference drawing, delete if unused, right there. Hit OK, it's gone. Once you hit OK, you'll see that that whole layer is gone, all that geometry is gone. The only thing that's remaining is the classing, which I will change the class of this guy just to put it on the none class. Very bad of me, but there it is. I don't want to see any of those DWG because it's going to confuse people. Whoever else works on the drawing, trying to create viewports, you don't want that stuff in there. Tools, purge, get rid of any unused classes, hit OK. Now you could potentially have classes in there you want to keep. Couldn't. This is your chance to deselect stuff or select it, hit OK. There you go. It's all gone. And you're still left with the stuff that you redrew and some of the geometry that you stole from the resource drawing. I hope this tutorial helps, and happy drafting.